Your focus isn't broken, it's being broken, deliberately all day by a world built to shatter your attention and sell you the pieces. And the cure was perfected 1,000 years ago by a man with a brush, my father. Every evening he sat and ground a stick of ink against a wet stone, slow, small circles, 5 silent minutes, before he wrote a single word. As a child, I thought it was the most boring thing a grown man could do. I was wrong. Those 5 silent minutes were the most important of his day, and they hold the exact thing your scattered mind is missing. Let me be honest about what this is and isn't, because I'm not going to sell you a magic trick. I'm not a neuroscientist, and where I talk about the brain, I'm giving you the way I've come to understand it. Not a lecture from a lab. What I am is someone raised inside a tradition that treated attention as something you build with your hands, slowly, through friction and breath and ritual, and who then grew up into a modern world that treats attention as something you spend instantly until there's nothing left. I've lived on both sides of that line, and I've come to believe that the old way my father practiced without ever explaining it holds a blueprint for exactly the thing the modern world is desperate for and cannot seem to buy: the ability to place your mind on one thing and keep it there. Let me put you in the room because I want you to see it the way I saw it. It was small, and it was quiet, and it faced the back of the house away from the street. There was a wooden desk by the window that my father had used for as long as I had been alive, and on it sat 4 things and only 4 things: a brush resting across a small ceramic stand, a stick of dried ink, a flat dark stone with a shallow well at one end, and a folded sheet of paper. Nothing else, no cup, no clutter, no ornament. When he came to that desk in the evening, after the meal, after the day, he did not sit down and immediately begin. He sat and he poured a few drops of water into the well of the stone, and he picked up the ink stick and he began to grind. And for the next several minutes, that was all that happened in the room. The small circular sound of stone against stone, his breathing, nothing else. My mother would move quietly in the next room. I would watch from the doorway, and my father would grind his ink as if the rest of the world had been switched off, which, in a way, it had. I need you to understand what that grinding actually is, because everything else grows out of it. The ink he used did not come in a bottle. It came as a hard, dry stick, almost like charcoal, and to write with it, you had to make it liquid yourself by grinding it against the wet stone until the water darkened and thickened into ink. There was no shortcut. You could not grind faster to finish sooner. Grind too hard and the ink came out coarse and wrong. The stone set the pace, and the pace was slow, and you simply had to accept it. As a boy, I found this maddening. We lived even then in a world that was speeding up, and here was my father, a grown man with responsibilities, spending long minutes every night on a task a machine could have done in a second. I did not understand why he wouldn't just buy the bottled ink that had already appeared in the shops. I asked him once, he looked at me, and he thought about it, and then he said something I did not understand for another 20 years. He said, "The ink is not the point. Start with the friction, because that's where the whole thing begins, and it's the part that looks most useless from the outside." In a world of 2026, everything is engineered to be frictionless. You touch a screen, and the reward appears instantly. You feel a flicker of boredom, and 1,000 videos rush to fill it before the feeling can even finish forming. You think a thought about buying something, and it arrives at your door the next day. This frictionlessness feels like a gift, and in 100 small ways, it is. But it is quietly training your brain to expect that every impulse gets answered immediately, that the gap between wanting and having should be zero. And that expectation is the exact opposite of what focus requires. Focus is the ability to sit inside an unanswered impulse. It is the ability to want to check your phone and not check it. To feel the pull of distraction rise up in you and stay where you are anyway. To let a desire go unmet long enough to do the harder, slower, more valuable thing underneath it. And here is what my father knew in his hands without ever putting it into words. You cannot build that ability in a frictionless world because friction is the very thing that builds it. Grinding the ink is friction on purpose. It cannot be rushed. The stone does not care how busy you are, how important your evening is, how many things are waiting. You rub and you wait, and the ink slowly thickens. And in those minutes, something happens to the mind that I think is the secret hiding at the center of this entire practice. The grinding is not preparation for the work. The grinding is the work. It is a sensory loading screen, a slow ramp that carries the brain down out of its scattered, reactive, high-speed state and into something quieter and more ordered, so that by the time the brush is finally lifted, the mind is already still. My father was not wasting those 5 minutes waiting to begin. Those 5 minutes were the beginning. He was walking his own attention, step by patient step, from the noise of the day into a silence deep enough to write from. And a machine could not do that for him, and bottled ink could not do that for him, because the doing was the entire point. The ink is not the point, the grinding is. Let me describe a morning you'll probably recognize, because I've lived it too. You sit down, meaning to do the one important thing. Before you've even started, you check your phone just quickly, just to clear it. A message pulls you into a reply. The reply reminds you of something you needed to look up. The search shows you a headline. The headline has a video. 20 minutes later, you surface, slightly agitated, having done none of the thing you sat down to do. And you feel a low guilt you can't quite name, and you tell yourself you'll focus now, and then you do it again. This is not a character flaw. You are not weak or lazy or uniquely broken. You are a normal person with a normal brain being acted upon all day by systems engineered by some of the most talented people alive for the single purpose of fragmenting exactly the attention you are trying to hold together. It is not a fair fight, and pretending it's simply a matter of willpower is part of what keeps people stuck. The old practice understood something we've forgotten. Attention is not a matter of trying harder. It's a matter of building the conditions in which focus can happen and then stepping into them. If you've ever sat down to do something important and lost the first 20 minutes just circling it, opening tabs, checking things, unable to actually begin, then you already know from the inside what the inkstone fixes. We threw away the loading screen, we leap straight from a scrolling feed into deep work with nothing in between, and then blame ourselves when the mind won't land, but the ink is only half of it. The other half is what my father did the moment he lifted the brush, and it's stranger and more powerful than the grinding. Before I show you that, do one small thing, because it tells me this is landing and it helps the next person find it. Tell me in the comments what your inkstone could be. The slow, analog ritual you'd put before your hardest work. I read everyone. And if your focus is the thing quietly coming apart in your life, subscribe. Because the second half of this is the part that actually changes how you work. Now, the breath and the stroke, because this is where the tradition stops being about patience and becomes something almost physiological. When my father finally lifted the brush, his breathing changed, and I didn't notice it as a child, but I see it clearly in memory now. Before a stroke, he would inhale, a slow, low breath gathering. As the brush descended and moved across the paper, he would exhale, slowly, and the stroke would ride out on that single breath from beginning to end. The breath and the movement were one thing. He was not breathing while he wrote. He was writing with his breath. When the stroke finished, the breath finished. He would pause, gather another breath, and only then begin the next line. The whole practice moved at the speed of breathing, which is to say the speed of a calm body, which is to say a speed the anxious mind cannot keep up with and eventually has to surrender to. And this is not decoration, and it is not mysticism. It is a way of using the body to steady the mind, because the breath is the one thread that runs between the two. You cannot directly command your mind to be calm. Anyone who has lain awake at 3 a.m. knows that ordering yourself to relax does nothing. But you can slow your breath deliberately with your body, and when you do, the mind tends to follow. My father had found, or inherited, a practice that harnessed exactly this, that used the slow, deliberate breath as a rope to pull the scattered mind down into stillness, one stroke at a time. A single character done well demands that the hand, the eye, and the breath all synchronize into one unbroken motion. And in the moment that they do, something happens that the old masters had a name for. They called it entering the flow, the state where the self quiets, where the sense of effort falls away, where there is no longer a person doing a thing, but simply the thing happening, seamlessly through them. I want to be careful here, because this is where these ideas get oversold, and I promised you I wouldn't do that. The old tradition has a word for the force that moves through the brush in that state. Qi, and I'm going to use it, but I'm going to use it honestly. Qi is a concept from within the tradition itself, a way that culture understood the flow of energy and life and breath through the body and the world. I am not going to stand here and tell you that Qi is a proven substance that scientists have measured, because that would be dishonest and you would be right to close the video. What I will tell you is that the state the old calligraphers were describing when they spoke of Qi flowing through the brush, the absorbed, effortless, fully present state, is something the modern world has rediscovered under completely different names and now studies intensely because it turns out to be where human beings do their best and deepest work. The modern world calls it flow or deep work or peak performance and spends fortunes trying to reach it with apps and hacks and supplements. The calligrapher reached it with a brush, a breath, and a single black line because the practice is built at every level to force the scattered mind into one place. Different framework, different language. Pointing, I think, at something real that both traditions circle from opposite sides. Think about what a single stroke actually requires because this is the heart of why it works on the mind. You cannot let your attention wander in the middle of a brush stroke. The ink is committing to the paper in real time. There is no undo, no backspace, no second chance, no way to lift it back off once it has soaked into the fibers. The stroke is happening now, and it demands the whole of you now. If your mind drifts even for an instant, if you start thinking about tomorrow, about a worry, about anything other than the line under your hand, the stroke will show it. It will waver, or thicken, or break. The paper is an honest witness. It records exactly how present you were in a way you cannot fake and cannot fix. This is the opposite of how we use our minds all day, where our attention is split across 6 things at once and fully present for none of them, and nothing ever tells us the cost because the cost is invisible. The brush makes the cost visible. It turns your wandering mind into a crooked line you have to look at. The brush forces what I think of as a cognitive anchor, a single, physical, unrepeatable act that the mind cannot drift away from without immediately ruining it. And the resistance of the brush against the paper, that slight drag, that deliberate friction, is part of the anchoring. It feeds a constant, subtle signal back to the hand and the mind that says, you are here, you are doing this, stay. A screen gives you no such signal. A screen is frictionless and consequenceless. You can type a sentence while thinking about something else entirely, and the letters appear just as crisp. So the mind is free to wander, and it does, constantly because nothing is holding it. The brush, by resisting you, keeps you present. The very thing that makes it slow, that drag, that effort, that refusal to be rushed, is the thing that makes it work. We have spent a century engineering the friction out of everything, believing friction was the enemy, and in doing so, we may have engineered out the very thing that was holding our attention together. We're halfway in, and if you keep only one idea from all of this, keep this one. It turns the modern approach to focus completely upside down. We treat friction, slowness, and resistance as problems. We buy the faster app, the smoother tool, the frictionless system, but focus isn't built by removing friction. It's built by choosing the right friction and staying inside it. Everything the stone and the brush do to the mind, they do because they're slow and effortful, not in spite of it. Ease was supposed to set us free. Ease is what scattered us. If that just landed, send this to the one person you know whose attention is fried, who's busy all day and still can't think, because in a minute, I'm going to give you the exact 3-part ritual to rebuild it, and they'll want it too. That's the whole reason a channel like this survives. So let me make this concrete and usable, because a philosophy you can't practice on a Monday morning is just decoration. And I want to be clear before I start, you do not need a brush and an inkstone. If the idea genuinely moves you, I'd gently say try it. There's nothing quite like the real thing, but most of you won't, and you don't have to because the tools were never the point. The tools were a delivery system for a structure, and the structure is what you can steal and use tomorrow morning, whatever your work is. It comes in 3 parts, and I'll walk you through each one slowly because each one matters. The first part is the ramp, the deliberate loading screen, the modern version of grinding the ink. Before your hardest work of the day, build in a few minutes of slow, analog, single-task ritual that cannot be rushed. It can be almost anything, as long as it is slow, physical, and screen-free. Making tea by hand and actually watching it steep, not looking at your phone while it steeps, watching it. Sharpening a pencil, wiping down and clearing your desk with full attention, sitting with your eyes closed and breathing while you do nothing else at all. The specific activity does not matter. What matters is that it is slow, that it uses your hands, and that it cannot be sped up. The point is to give your nervous system the ramp it no longer gets, the slow descent from scattered to still, so that you do not try to leap from the chaos of a feed straight into deep concentration with nothing in between, which is the single most common way people fail to focus and then blame themselves for it. My father could not write well from a noisy mind, so he built the quiet first every single time without exception for years. Neither can you write or code or think or create anything real from a noisy mind. So build a quiet first. Grind your ink, whatever your ink turns out to be. The second part is the anchor, some element of physical, real-world friction inside the work itself, something that gives your wandering mind a body to hold on to. This is why writing longhand focuses you differently than typing. It is why reading on paper holds you in a way that reading on a screen so often doesn't. Why you can read 4 pages on a phone and realize you absorbed none of it. It is why so many of the people whose work demands the very deepest concentration keep coming back to physical tactile tools even when faster digital ones exist. The screen removes friction, and in removing friction, it removes the anchor, and the unanchored mind drifts away like a boat with no line, so wherever you can, put a little deliberate resistance back into your work. Draft the hard thing by hand before you type it. Print the document out and mark it up with a real pen. Think through the problem on paper, not on a screen. Work wherever it's possible in a way that your body can actually feel, because the body is the thread that keeps the mind from floating off, exactly as the breath rode the brush across the page. The friction is not slowing you down, the friction is holding you here. The third part is the environment, and here the ancient scholar's desk has more to teach us than any productivity system I have ever read. Picture my father's desk again, almost bare, the brush, the ink, the stone, the paper, and nothing else. No clutter, no ornament, no second task waiting in the corner, no competing demand for the eye. As a child, I thought this was just how old people kept things, plain and sparse. I understand now that it was cognitive strategy refined over centuries, though no one ever called it that. Because here's the thing almost no one accounts for. Every object in your field of vision is a small, silent claim on your attention. A tiny open loop the mind has to keep half-tracking, whether you notice it or not. The unopened mail, the other project's notes, the phone lying face up, each one is a thread, and each thread pulls a thin filament of your attention away from the center, and you never feel it happening. You only feel the result, which is that you cannot fully concentrate, and you don't know why. The scholar's desk was stripped bare so that nothing in the room competed with the single character being formed. Nothing pulled. The field was clear. Now look honestly at where you do your own hardest work. The open tabs, each one a small, unfinished thing. The notifications stacked and waiting, the 11 objects on the desk, each a small loop. The phone face up in the corner of your eye, the single most attention-shredding object ever placed on a working surface in human history. Every one of them is a thread, pulling. And the old practice says something very simple and very hard: remove them. Not most of them, them. Clear the field around your hardest work until it is as empty and quiet as a scholar's desk. The one document, the one tool, the one task, and nothing else in sight. And you give your mind the one thing the modern world will never hand you willingly, which is a space clear enough to actually think in. This is the least mystical thing I will say all video, and possibly the most powerful. Much of what you have been calling a focus problem is actually an environment problem, and you can fix a great deal of it just by taking things off the desk. There is one more piece I have to tell you about, because for years I missed it entirely, and it changes everything about how this actually worked in our home. My father could not have done any of this alone. The stillness he built at that desk each evening was not something he generated purely from within himself, by force of will. It was something the whole household protected. My mother understood, in a way that was never spoken aloud, that those minutes were not to be interrupted. She kept the house quiet around him. She did not call out a question or ask him to deal with some small thing, or let the ordinary noise of a family evening spill into that room while he was there. It was not that she served him, it was that she guarded something they both understood to be valuable. The quiet was a shared creation. And I think this is the piece the modern productivity world, with all its apps and its individual life hacks, almost completely ignores. That deep focus is rarely a purely solo achievement. It is protected, or it is destroyed, by the people and the environment around you. A household, a family, a workplace either treats one person's concentration as sacred, or it treats it as always interruptible, and that collective choice matters as much as anything the individual does. My father had a room that faced away from the street and a family that kept it quiet. Most of us are trying to focus in the middle of a stream of interruptions that everyone around us treats as normal and even virtuous. The always available, always responsive, instantly reachable worker. And we wonder why it's so hard. Part of reclaiming your attention is quietly teaching the people around you that some of your time is not interruptible, The way my mother taught our whole house that the grinding of the ink was not to be disturbed. And I want to tell you about the first time I tried to pass this on to my own son, because it taught me something I didn't expect. He was young and restless in the way children are now, his attention already trained by screens to expect everything at once. I sat him at a small table with paper and a brush and a little ink, thinking I would teach him what my father taught me. And it went badly. He wanted the character to be good immediately. He grew frustrated within a minute when it wasn't. He wanted to rush, to skip the grinding, to get to the end. And I recognized, watching him, the exact impatience the modern world had trained into him, the same impatience it has trained into all of us, myself included. So I stopped trying to teach him to write. Instead, I just sat with him and taught him to grind the ink. Only that. Slow circles, no goal, nothing to be good at. And something interesting happened over the following weeks. He got calmer, not because I told him to be calm, but because the grinding did to him what it had done to my father. It gave his racing little mind a slow, physical thing to rest on, and after a few minutes of it, he was different, steadier, more present. He still can't write a beautiful character, that was never the point. The ink is not the point. There is a deeper current under all of this that I don't want to leave unspoken, because it's the real reason this matters and not just a trick for getting more done. What my father was really practicing at that inkstone night after night was a kind of sovereignty in a world that was already, even then, beginning to pull at everyone's attention from every direction. He had a daily practice that said, "My mind is my own. I decide where it goes. And I will train that ability with my own hands until no one and nothing can take it from me." That is a far larger thing than productivity. Productivity is about getting more done. This is about who owns the beam of your attention in the first place. You or the countless systems built and funded specifically to capture it and sell it. Because the ability to direct your own attention is, in the deepest possible sense, the ability to direct your own life. Your life is made of what you pay attention to. It is made of nothing else. The people you truly see, the work you actually sink into, the moments you are fully inside instead of half watching, that is your life, the real one. And a mind that cannot choose where it rests is a mind that will be chosen for endlessly by whoever designs the next thing built to capture it. You will have lived, but you will not have chosen how. And so this ancient practice of brush and breath and stone turns out not to be a quaint hobby at all, not a relaxing pastime for people with time to spare, but something much closer to a survival skill for the century we are actually living in. The deliberate, physical, patient training of the one human capacity that the modern world is most determined to strip away from you, because your fragmented attention is quite literally the product being sold. To sit and grind your ink in whatever form you choose is a small act of refusal. It says, "Not all of me is for sale. Some of me I keep, some of me I train. This corner of my mind, I govern myself." And I want to leave you with something you can actually do tonight or tomorrow, because I don't want this to stay a beautiful idea you nod at and forget. Take 10 minutes, not 30, not an hour. 10. Find the slowest, most analog thing available to you and do only that with your whole attention and with no screen anywhere in reach. It can be tea. It can be a walk with no phone and no earbuds. It can be sitting at a cleared table and simply breathing, watching the breath the way my father watched the ink darken. The activity does not matter. What matters is that for 10 minutes you practice the lost art of doing one slow thing completely, of letting an impulse to check, to scroll, to switch, rise up in you and pass without obeying it. That is the entire discipline in miniature. That is grinding the ink. And if you do it daily, not perfectly, not for long, just daily, you will feel something come back that you may not have even realized you'd lost, the sense of a mind that answers to you, a mind that can be placed on a thing and will stay there, a mind that is, once again, your own. It will not happen in a day. My father built his over a lifetime, one quiet evening at a time, but it will happen because attention obeys the same law as everything else worth having in a human life. It is built slowly by hand, through friction, by people patient enough to grind the ink when the world is screaming at them to just buy the bottle. That is why I don't think of calligraphy or the ritual behind it as being about beautiful writing at all. The beautiful writing is the byproduct, the visible residue of an invisible discipline. The real thing being practiced is the gathering of a scattered self into a single, present, sovereign point. The daily reclaiming of your own mind from the forces that would fragment it and profit from the pieces. My father never once explained any of this to me. He didn't have the modern words for it, and he wouldn't have used them if he had. He simply ground his ink each evening and breathed his strokes onto the paper, and in doing so, he was quietly practicing the most advanced focus technology I have ever encountered, which turned out in the end not to be a technology at all, but the patient mastery of his own rhythm. The tools were 1,000 years old. The problem they solve has never been more modern. And the whole secret, if there even is a secret, is simply this. Your attention is built, not bought, and it is built the old way. Slowly, with friction, with breath, and with the deliberate daily refusal to let your own mind be taken from you. And if this video shifted something in the way you see your own scattered attention, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more on how the world's wisest cultures quietly build calmer, sharper, more sovereign human minds, subscribe. There's a lot more coming. See you in the next one.